Hi, I'm Ashley Adamson, and I am back in Berlin. I just got here, and oh my God, it's been a hell of a trip. The whole FFS thing and breast augmentation and all of that 4 months ago. My face has settled in a bit more. I'm at 80%. I'm good to go. I'm good to go. So today, what I wanted to cover in today's episode was a question one of y'all submitted, Emma Ross, and she submitted quite a thick question. There's a lot in there, so I'm actually just going to focus on the first part and maybe address the second part in another video. Her question was how to navigate learning to move through the world as a woman. What things are still changing for you socially, and how has this changed over time during your transition? I love that question. What do you think of it? It's something that I think is well worth diving into, and it's an interesting reflection moment for me. So I'm going to start with what's relevant to me now, and then I'll start moving back as things kind of jog my memory. So right now, the thing, and my HRT anniversary is coming up at the end of the month. Well, my HRT anniversary is actually coming up on Sunday, and then my anniversary, my rebirth, is happening at the end of the month because I started HRT and then I guess a month later I was reborn as a woman. So this is actually a really interesting topic, isn't it? So right now, what I'm navigating is figuring out how to exist as a woman around men. And why that is something I'm figuring out is because I'm dating men. I date men. And I question myself in that I wonder sometimes if I am passing in the way that I am voicing my own opinions and expressing my thoughts. Now, this is a really dumb thing for me to be thinking about, and I'm sure some of you will be like, girl, just be whoever you are and express your thoughts or however you want to be, right? There's no gender way of being opinionated, so to speak. What do you think? But I think about this because sometimes I feel like I can express things in a way that are very blunt and are abrasive. And I think someone who is more seasoned in expressing themselves in their gender, especially women, are more eloquent in being less blunt, I would say. I wouldn't say all women, but I've noticed that women in general seem to kind of learn how to express themselves in ways where it's not very jarring. And I am a very jarring person, or that's what I think at least when I get my opinions going. But I love sharing them with you, and I'm glad you're still here because, so I think that's something that I'm wondering when I express my opinions. For example, let me give you a text message thread that I had with this guy that I was speaking to. So I said this. Because he's like, hey, I'd love to, he said, well, before we meet, I'd also love if you keep me visually engaged meanwhile. And I'm like, dude, I said, I don't know, it depends on if you keep me engaged. And then he says, you bet I will. I also take requests when I am feeling gracious and playful. And I'm thinking to myself, well, sexting or sending back and forth messages like this are kind of I don't know, boring. So I just replied back with this kind of landmark and said, hey, this is my opinion. Well, I think what was working is having a real back and forth of longer form messages like the one you sent and I sent back. I don't think shorter flirty messages offer much substance to get to know someone or be that entertaining beyond the traditional novelty of sexting. Even that gets boring too. I don't know. What do you think? Shrug. And that last part, I tried to soften, kind of hey, I'm coming at you with a strong opinion, and if you're not into it, then we're not talking, kind of a thing. But yeah, he was kind of all right, cool, maybe we'll exchange voice chat, so that's what we're doing. So that's something that's super relevant to me now is as a trans woman who is navigating a dating experience with cis men, what is the right way of expressing in which I can feel heard and also am not threatening to men. Like, I know this is, if you're a feminist, I'm sure you're like, be fucking threatening to men. Sorry, I just swore. But I'm not like really trying to be threatening, and also, I'm also not trying to date men that are threatened by women. Like, that's not a thing, but I don't know. Like, this is kind of like the stuff that's going through my head. So the other thing that I'm dealing with is actually being gendered properly. People gender me properly now, but I feel sometimes like I'm still the old version of myself, and I'm kind of surprised when they say like she or whatever. I'm like, huh, I'm flattered, but all right, I'll take it. So that's a weird one because I've been like she, her for almost 3 years now, and it's kind of like something that I think I protected myself from. What I mean is, when I was non-binary and when I was early in my transition, I would get misgendered all the time. And it really hurts. Like, how does it feel when you get misgendered? Because it's like this thing where you see yourself one way and the external world has labeled you another. And it's reaffirming the external world's perception of who you are. And that, as much as you want to not have that affect your own self-perception, it kind of gets in there. And depending on who does it, it can strike deep. Like when my sister misgendered me, that was like a pretty personal thing. Or when like a stranger misgenders you, like at a restaurant or something. That, I'm just like, whatever, it doesn't hurt. How do you feel about being misgendered, by the way? Like, do you care more when a stranger misgenders you or when someone really close misgenders you? I'd love to hear from you, like, if there's a difference in feeling about this. My own personal philosophy is the more you know me, the more I hope and expect from you to see me as who I truly am. Because if you don't, then you're not really seeing me. And if we're friends, like, that's kind of a part of the deal of being a friend, is you support them. So I always kind of like created this defense around not accepting any gender that's given to me. And now I'm kind of stuck with this thing where I feel genderless in terms of the pronouns that are used on me. Earlier in my transition, I think the biggest and most surprising thing was the change of my relationships with other women, because oh my God, this is like a big one and more relevant today. And if there are cis men or gay men or just men who identify as men here, this will be interesting for you too, because women, cis women, treat men differently than women, especially in public spaces, because often they don't feel safe around men and they kind of label all men as being dangerous. And I remember as a man that if I were to just be like, hey, or just smile at a woman that I'm like walking by in the grocery store, they'd give me the cold shoulder, they wouldn't be nice. And I just really get sometimes bad vibes of like, oh, like there's this person, which is me, occupying the space. And, I would feel uncomfortable. And I never got it. I thought it was just kind of like, oh, maybe they just don't like the way I look or whatever. But now I'm like, oh yeah, it's because I was perceived to be a cis man. And that's how women work around cis men in public, because you don't know which man is going to be a rapist or a killer or just going to bother you. You don't want to give them any leverage to do that. And so now, as a cis woman, yeah, like I'd really love to be a cis woman. Actually, I don't know about that. I'm kind of like, there's a lot of struggle with being a trans woman, wouldn't you say? And as much as I would love to just wake up as a cis woman, I don't know if I would have gone through the same challenges and the same evolution of thought, feeling, and experience that would bring me to where I am today. And that experience in itself was so powerful and life-changing. I can't imagine life without it. And if I was a cis woman, I just wouldn't have that kind of a life-changing thing. I would look for some other struggles that I feel like would actually not be as deep and as long-lasting in creating satisfaction for myself. But yeah, so now that I'm seen as a woman in public, when I smile at a woman, or there's like a bumping of shoulders, so to speak, like kind of like trying to cross the road or whatever, I get treated nicely by women. Like they smile back, they laugh, they're just more friendly. And I was confused about this when I was first starting out, because I was like, why are women suddenly more friendly to me? So, okay, now we're going to step back and talk about the meta, because I want to also address navigating the part of like being more, like existing more as a woman. And I think this is super important, because you can apply this in anywhere in life, and we're going to hone in specifically on the trans woman experience, but I mean, you can do this for any trans experience or any human experience. Navigating. So let's take a look here. So what are you navigating? So you're navigating societal expectations and societal projections of who you are perceived to be. And when you are perceived to be something else, suddenly you slip into another form of who you are without necessarily your own consent. It just happens. And that is probably the more jarring thing, is you just have suddenly slipped into something else and you didn't recognize it. And that affects your own perception of who you are now. And I think as you transition, this can really help with your own personal internal momentum, because if people start treating you as a woman or as a man, you will begin to continue to see reason to embrace and believe that you are a woman or a man. And you can do this without external validation, but it sure as well is easier with external validation. Am I right? So that definitely kind of like this external reality versus this internal reality, they have this relationship. And if you can get externally validated, that's going to help you speed up in your transition. The other thing is, sometimes you don't recognize it the first time. Sometimes you don't recognize it the second time. Sometimes you don't recognize it a lot. I still walk out in public and I think, gosh, like I look like a man. They're going to know I'm a man. Like I might as well just say that I'm trans. So, wait, did I just say they're going to know I'm a man? No, I mean, like, what I mean is they're going to think that I'm a man, and they're going to know that I'm a man, not that I am a man. So, like, that, my own perception, despite maybe, like, having my surgery or looking a certain way, that, where was I going with that? I'm not sure. The repetition of the pattern of the experience can help kind of like help you evolve and change. And the other thing about navigating, I'd say, is probably having flexibility in your own expectations of who you are. As you transition, you will start to kind of like come out of your shell, so to speak, like in the chrysalis, the butterfly, you know, that whole analogy. And when you go through this process of transitioning your external reality and your internal reality, you will come up against parts of your ego, your sense of self, that will become in friction. Like I've thought of myself this way and I'm sticking to it, or am I letting it go? And these are the mannerisms that you've developed through your life, for me as a man, that you have to kind of audit, take a look at, and see if they're worth keeping. And then find what replaces them. it can feel sometimes like you're discarding a part of yourself or throwing it out the window or even burning it down. That's probably the hardest one, is feeling like you're burning yourself, that a part of you is dying. But let it be known, you're not dying, you're just transforming. And a part of the transformation process, like think of earth and plants, is the thing has to die in order for you to like take that raw material, the self, and reconfigure it and shift it into a new version of who you are. And if you don't, then what you have is you kind of like, let's use a tree analogy. I transitioned later. So let's say this is like I want to make it black. This is my full like plant tree of my male self. And this is my female self. And when I get started, it's just a little bit of female self. Hi. But then as I grow, it kind of like starts to grow and grow and grow. But I only have so much capacity within my brain and my energy and my power to really be able to hold these two things together. And so when I first start transitioning, it's sort of like most of my personality, most of my persona is operating within this world. And as I grow here, I kind of choose what to kind of pick at and take to acquire and grow into my woman self. But at some point you're like, oh, like there's not enough room here for both of us, and you need to, and what I call it is burn it down. So you just let it kind of burn and burn and burn, and let kind of the rot and everything that comes off of that turn into something to help you grow and absorb that and grow, maybe even grow on it and kind of replace it. And you merge with some of those personalities. I definitely think that my bluntness, which I spoke about earlier, is still around. I was blunt as a guy. I just was very cautious about being blunt. Oh my God, this one's really interesting. But as a woman, I can be blunt and people are not as offended. In business, I can literally just call it like it is and people are like, what? Okay, cool. How did you do that? And I think that's a skill that cis women and cis men don't have, because they don't know how to navigate both worlds. And navigating as a cis, having the bluntness of a cis man, but knowing how to kind of like shell that in my feminine presentation and expression can really soften the blow. And I can really talk about really blunt things now, which is cool. God, this video is probably going on for a while, so I'm going to stop it, and I'll have to continue it in another episode. Love you so much. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Where's the